In the late 19th century, the Russian Empire was an autocracy defined by extreme wealth inequality. While the Romanov dynasty held absolute power, the peasant majority lived in deep poverty, still grappling with the economic limitations of former serfdom. Opposition was met with state execution. In 1887, a St. Petersburg University student named Aleksandr Ulyanov was hanged for his involvement in a plot to assassinate Tsar Alexander III. Vladimir Ulyanov had grown up in a comfortable upper-middle-class home, excelling in chess and academics. Following his brother's execution, these intellectual pursuits shifted toward an aggressive questioning of the Tsarist social order. After being expelled from Kazan University for participating in student protests, Ulyanov spent his isolation studying the works of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. He adopted their theories as a framework for active subversion against the Russian state. This period marked the end of Ulyanov's life as a standard intellectual. His brother's death focused his efforts on a single goal: the total destruction of the existing imperial system. Years of underground activity and Siberian exile followed, eventually leading Ulyanov into Western Europe. There, he adopted the pseudonym Lenin and began refining a specific vision for the coming struggle. Classical Marxism suggested that a society must develop a capitalist industry and a large middle class before reaching socialism. Lenin rejected this waiting period, arguing that Russia could bypass these stages. In his 1902 pamphlet, What is to be Done, Lenin introduced the vanguard. This was a small, highly disciplined elite of professional revolutionaries whose job was to direct the masses and force the revolution to occur. This demand for a narrow, centralized party elite caused a permanent split in the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party in 1903. Lenin's uncompromising faction became known as the Bolsheviks. The vanguard theory ensured the revolution would function as a clinical operation directed by a self-appointed leadership. By 1917, World War I had exhausted the empire's resources. Massive riots in Petrograd led to the Tsar's abdication, ending Romanov rule. Recognizing an opportunity to destabilize their enemy, the German military provided Lenin with a sealed train to return to Russia. They viewed him as a political bioweapon, one capable of creating enough chaos to knock Russia out of the war. Lenin arrived with his April Theses, a document that rejected the new moderate provisional government. He demanded all power to the Soviets, the local councils of workers and soldiers. A summer of failed protests forced Lenin into hiding in Finland, but his party's influence grew. When a right-wing general attempted a coup in August, the desperate government issued weapons to the Bolshevik Red Guards to help defend the capital. In October, Lenin secretly returned to Petrograd. He coordinated with Leon Trotsky, the tactical architect of the Bolshevik forces, to organize the final seizure of state power. On October 25th, Bolshevik militias took control of the city's infrastructure and stormed the Winter Palace. It was a calculated coup rather than a spontaneous mass uprising. The Bolsheviks initially issued a Declaration of Rights, promising equality and sovereignty to all Russian peoples. However, they immediately began centralizing all administrative authority within their own party. The shift to autocracy was confirmed in early 1918, when the Bolsheviks failed to win a majority in the democratic elections for a constituent assembly. Lenin ordered his guards to dissolve the assembly at gunpoint. The forced dissolution of the assembly marked the end of democratic hopes and the official start of the vanguard's dictatorship. To survive, Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. He sacrificed vast amounts of fertile land and industry in Ukraine and the Baltics to buy time for his new government. The treaty and the Bolshevik takeover triggered a brutal civil war. The Red Army faced a coalition of monarchists and rival socialists known as the White Army, supported by several foreign powers. Under the pressures of war, Lenin implemented war communism, which included the forced seizure of grain from peasants. To crush internal dissent, he authorized the Red Terror, utilizing the same oppressive methods as the Tsars. He established the Cheka, a secret police force led by Felix Dzerzhinsky. The Cheka executed thousands without trial and began building a network of political labor camps that would persist for decades. By 1921, these policies had contributed to a catastrophic famine. Millions of Russians starved as the agricultural system collapsed under the weight of requisitioning and war. To prevent a total economic breakdown, Lenin introduced the new economic policy. This was a tactical retreat that reintroduced limited capitalist trade to stabilize the food supply and the economy. The era revealed a stark irony. The survival of the communist revolution depended on both Tsarist policing tactics and capitalist trade. Lenin's health declined rapidly in the early 1920s. A series of massive strokes eventually left him paralyzed and unable to speak, isolating him from the party he had created. Before his death, Lenin dictated a final testament. He warned his colleagues about the growing power of Joseph Stalin, describing him as too brutal for the leadership role. The warning was ignored. After Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin assumed control and began mummifying Lenin's body for public display, using the founder's image to legitimize his own rule. Contemporaries like Rosa Luxemburg had predicted this outcome. She argued that centralizing power in an elite vanguard would inevitably result in a system of total bureaucracy and tyranny. Lenin refined the autocratic mechanics of the Russian state, providing his successor with the infrastructure for a totalizing 20th century regime.